Remember I said that we also raised pigs? Well, when one of the mother pigs had babies, we loved watching them. They were such cute, little, tiny, squealy things. But you couldn't pet them because the sow wouldn't let you. If you were fortunate enough or daring enough to pick one of these squealing, wriggling piggies and was able to climb over the enclosure of the pig pen and run away with it, you were an unusual person. Very rarely did any one of us go inside to pick one of these baby pigs up. It was a dangerous thing to do, knowing how wickedly and wildly the mother pig behaved. She would actually tear you to pieces if it were possible for her to get at you. It's strange and interesting how, no matter what the mother is, she will protect her young, and pigs are no exceptions. In time, the baby pigs were also sold to butchers, as we could not keep all of them. We didn't need them all. We had baby calves also born to some of our cows. The boy calves were neutered, and when old enough and big enough, they were sold for beef. The heifers, the little girl calves, remained and were kept to become milking cows in adulthood. They had to be several years old before they were bred to have babies. The baby calves were also so very, very cute. Now my father didn't raise many cows at first, but later he had a dairy farm, not too big, but big enough to sell milk to a New Haven dairy. The dairy was strict about cleanliness of the barn and the cows, health of the cows, and proper care of the milk. There were also state requirements concerning this. Inspectors came around when least expected and checked on the barn, the milk, the cooling systems, and so forth. Everything had to be up to standard. Now it was at this time that my dad had to dig a second well and closed it in a little shed, a little building. And in it there was a large vat in which to place large cans of milk to cool, and a pump, a hand pump, to pump the water from the well into this vat. We had to have chunks of ice to cool the water in the vat. The milk had to be cooled to a certain temperature in order to be picked up by the dairy company. We couldn't buy the ice. Not only would it have been too expensive, but also too difficult and too time-consuming to go for it to a retail ice house. You know what this meant? Have your own ice house. Get your own ice from the lake in the wintertime. And I'm going to continue with the need for an ice house of our own, because my dad needed the ice for his dairy equipment and the milk. My father had to build his own ice house. Now, between the outside wall of this building and the inside wall was a space of about 2 feet in thickness. This space had to be filled with sawdust right to the very top, so as to retain the cold within. There was a space also underneath the building, which was filled with sawdust, as well as the space between the roof and the ceiling inside of the building. Sawdust there had to be likewise as in the walls. Then also between the layers of ice, there had to be a little sawdust. Now in winter, the men went out to Gardener's Lake to cut the big chunks of ice. These chunks were sometimes 12 to 16 inches thick and about maybe 14 to 16 inches or whatever long. Now that meant very big chunks of ice. This was very difficult, but it had to be done. This ice had to be brought home and placed into the ice house. And of course there had to be enough then to stay and be used for the whole summer. Usually there was even ice left over. That is, if you were careful not to waste it. My father at that time had a little pickup truck that he brought the ice home in. That, I think, was about in 1924. I'm not quite sure. There was one thing we never had, was a little colt, although we had female horses as well as male horses. The horses were not breeders. They were only used for work and driving, and heavens knows there was enough work for them almost every day of the year, one kind or another, from spring to spring. Of course, there were times when the horses could graze with the cows. Other times they had to be fed with both grain and hay in their stalls. Now I'm going to tell you a little story about the horses. Stalls were separate sections of the horse stables to hold only one horse. Each stall was divided by a wall. Our horse stable could hold 3 horses, which is the most we ever had at one time. The horse was tied in his stall, which had a wooden bin at the head of it. Into this bin we put grain or hay for the horse to eat. The boys loved the horses and were not afraid of any of them. They could ride horseback and they could harness them for driving, etc. I loved the horses, but only from a distance. The boys would even crawl under the horse from one side to the other to show off. I would watch in terror for fear of being dared to do the same. My fears were realized. "I dare you, I dare you, I dare you," they would say. Well, no matter how many times they uttered, "I dare you," I didn't bite. "Sissy, sissy," they would say. Well, that didn't do much good either. One day they dared me to give one of the horses a container of oats. I was to go by him in the stall and put the oats in the bin. The horse was standing to one side, so I thought I'd quickly go by him, pour the oats into the bin, and beat it back. I did just that, But just as I started back, the horse moved over against the wall, and I couldn't move past him. I was pinned there. I patted him and patted him to move over, but he wouldn't budge. I was at the point of hysteria. The boys, Walter and Bill, and maybe even Bruno, were laughing hysterically at my predicament. I kept patting the horse gently and pushing him slightly. The horse looked at me as if to say, okay, and he moved. I wasted no time. Out I went, past the horse, and into the yard, out of the barn. I wasn't afraid, said I. The horse listened to me. See? But never again did I go into the horse stable to feed the horse. Kidding or no kidding, I wouldn't go near him. I may have been probably 11 or 12 years old then, just a scared little kid. The places where the horses stayed were called stalls. But in the cow barn, the holding spots for each cow were called stanchions. Now, when the cows were chased into the barn, each cow knew to which stanchion she was to go. When she put her head into the holder, she stood there until someone dropped the bar over her head to hold her there all night or whatever time she was to stay in. After milking time, the cows were let out to graze, even all night during the summer. During cold weather, they were kept inside and fed with grain and hay. Each morning and evening, the cows had to be milked. That was a chore which had to be done at the same time every day. It could never be missed. Now, we helped with these chores when we were able to handle the job. I milked cows sometimes, too. Now, the milk had to be cooled in the little milk house where the vat with the ice-cold water was and where the pump was to put the water in to cool the milk. It had to be cooled at the proper temperature in order to have the dairy company pick it up. So you see why we needed all that ice. If it wasn't cool enough, the dairy company would not take the milk, which meant the milk could not be sold and there was no money for it.